This is the precise instant when Donald Trump's grip on Middle Eastern affairs disintegrated. Not in some theoretical sense, not in future academic retrospectives. Right here, unfolding in real time as millions across the planet bear witness. If you direct your attention toward the primary assembly chamber at the United Nations Security Council headquarters in New York City, you're about to witness something unprecedented in American diplomatic history. Vacant seats. 14 separate nations rose and departed during the United States presentation on Iran. No polite excuses, no waiting for intermission. These diplomats stood upright, pushed their chairs backward, and walked straight out while the American ambassador continued speaking. The sound of those chairs grinding against polished marble reverberated throughout the chamber. Video recordings documented diplomats representing France, Germany, Japan, and South Korea methodically collecting their papers and exiting. At precisely 11:47 a.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, March 10, 2026, Iran's foreign minister positioned himself before those cameras and articulated three words the White House has been dreading more than any military strike. We reject everything. Not we need time, not we're considering options. We reject everything. Donald Trump already confronting deteriorating polls, economic indicators showing inflation accelerating faster than any quarter since 2022, alongside reports of Republican senators privately questioning his Iran policy, has just been humiliated globally by a nation he guaranteed to force into submission within 72 hours. That was 6 weeks ago. Throughout this analysis, we're exposing exactly what transpired in the 48 hours before this rejection. We're presenting leaked transcripts from emergency calls between Washington and allied capitals where American diplomats were told to stop calling. We're walking through three specific moments when Trump's advisors realized they'd lost control completely. And we're explaining why this morning's market reaction isn't just about oil prices. This is about trust. Donald Trump isn't merely failing to end a war. He's watching America's diplomatic architecture collapse in real time while insisting everything proceeds according to plan. 42 days ago, Trump stood in the Rose Garden announcing what he called the most brilliant military strategy in American history. The plan was forcing Iran into total surrender through maximum shock deployment. Hit them fast, hit them hard, watch the regime crumble within a week. Stage 1 involved simultaneous strikes on military command centers across Iran. Stage 2 introduced economic pressure through complete naval blockade of Hormuz, strangling their oil exports. Stage 3 anticipated back-channel negotiations, where Iranian leaders would accept American terms because they had no choice. The timeline given to Congress was 7 to 10 days from first strike to signed agreement. He promised no ground troops, no extended conflict, no economic blowback. He told Fox News, "Iran will be begging us for a deal by the weekend. They cannot survive what we're about to do." But the cost wasn't just military operations. It was destroying diplomatic relationships that took decades to build. European allies specifically warned that unilateral action without UN approval would fracture NATO cooperation. Japan and South Korea warned closing Hormuz would devastate their economies. Gulf partners said privately they wouldn't allow their bases for regime change operations. Trump's team dismissed every objection. Stephen Miller told senators they'll fall in line once they see Iran collapse. Everyone loves a winner. Marco Rubio assured business leaders markets would rally once Iran capitulated because stability would return. The entire strategy gambled on one assumption that Iran would break quickly, that pain would be so intense they'd have no choice but to surrender. That assumption was catastrophically wrong. At 6:23 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday, March 9th, 2026, Trump received a call that changed everything. The French president called. It lasted under 2 minutes. According to leaks from National Security Council sources, the French leader didn't ask Trump's position. He informed Trump that France was withdrawing from all joint military operations on Iran and would sponsor a UN resolution condemning the Hormuz blockade as violating international maritime law. Trump reportedly shouted that France was making the biggest mistake in its history. The French president hung up. While that happened, Germany issued a nearly identical statement. While Germany released theirs, Japan announced it would permanently reroute all energy imports away from the Persian Gulf, canceling contracts worth billions relying on American security guarantees. Dominoes were falling across continents. But the nightmare was beginning. At 9:15 a.m., the Dow opened down 847 points. Not because of Iran's military capabilities, but because Goldman Sachs released a note titled Diplomatic Isolation Premium, explaining American credibility had become a market risk factor. The note specifically cited traditional allies publicly breaking with Washington on an active military operation. By 10:30, the drop reached 1,143 points. While markets were in freefall, Trump was in the Oval Office on another call with the Saudi Crown Prince. Sources in the room described Trump as visibly agitated, pacing behind the resolute desk, voice rising. The Crown Prince reportedly told Trump that Saudi Arabia couldn't support further escalation and was already in talks with Iran about reopening regional dialogue. Trump responded, "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." The Crown Prince's reply, according to leaked transcripts, "Mr. President, you didn't consult us before starting this. We're now consulting ourselves on how to end it." The call ended. Trump threw his phone across the room. It shattered against the wall near the fireplace. That afternoon, at 2 p.m., the moment that will define this entire crisis occurred. Iran's foreign minister appeared on Al Jazeera, CNN International, and BBC simultaneously. He was calm, prepared, and delivered a statement the White House still has no response to. He said, "The United States offered us a ceasefire 3 times in 2 weeks. Each time they attached conditions requiring Iran to surrender sovereignty. Each time they leaked to media that we were close to agreement to look strong. Each time we clarified we'd agreed to nothing. Today, the United States went to the UN asking the world to pressure Iran into accepting their terms. We watched 14 nations walk out. We watched America's closest allies refuse to support this action. So now we make our position clear for the final time. We don't accept ceasefires that are really surrenders. We don't negotiate under blockade, and we won't end this conflict until Hormuz is reopened and all foreign military forces withdraw from our maritime borders." Then he said the part playing on every news network globally. President Trump can call this a peace offer. The world sees it for what it is, desperation. According to leaks from senior State Department officials who spoke to the Washington Post, a crisis meeting took place Monday night at 9 p.m. in the White House Situation Room. Participants included Trump, Rubio, DeSantis, Miller, and General Charles Brown. The topic was responding to Iran's rejection and the diplomatic crisis with European allies. Audio hasn't leaked, but 3 separate sources confirmed the same exchange. General Brown opened with a military briefing explaining the Hormuz blockade was sustainable for 3 more weeks maximum before logistics became critical. He noted Iran's retaliatory strikes had damaged 2 American destroyers, killed 19 service members, and hit targets in Bahrain and Kuwait supposed to be protected by American air defense. Trump interrupted, "Are we winning or not? Simple question." General Brown paused before answering, "Mr. President, Iran hasn't collapsed. Their leadership is still in place. Their military is still operational, and they're now striking our positions with increasing accuracy." Miller jumped in. "They're on the verge of breaking. We just need to maintain pressure." Rubio spoke next, tone measured but firm. "Mr. President, we have a diplomatic problem becoming a strategic crisis. France, Germany, Japan, and South Korea have all broken with us publicly. The Saudis are hedging. The UAE is in direct talks with Tehran. When I call my counterparts in European capitals, half won't take my calls anymore." Trump responded, "Then we don't need them. We never needed them." Rubio's reply, "Sir, the reason Iran isn't negotiating is because they see our allies abandoning us. They think they can wait us out, and based on what I'm seeing, they might be right." The room went silent. Trump stared at Rubio, then turned to DeSantis. "What do you recommend?" DeSantis said, We can escalate militarily. We can hit more targets inside Iran. We can send special forces for direct action against leadership. We can deploy ground forces under the justification of protecting American interests. But if we do that without allied support, without UN cover, we're crossing into territory that could trigger a regional war, pulling in actors we can't control. Trump stood from his chair. So everyone in this room is telling me we should just give up. Just let Iran humiliate us. Nobody answered immediately. Then Miller said, "We double down. We make it so painful they have no choice." General Brown responded with respect. That's been the strategy for 6 weeks. It hasn't worked. It was a cold assessment from the military's top officer. He wasn't being insubordinate. He was stating operational reality. But in that moment, according to sources, Trump realized even his own generals were telling him the plan had failed. The meeting ended at 11:17 p.m. No decisions made, no new strategy announced. Trump walked out first. Miller followed. The rest remained in the Situation Room for another 40 minutes discussing contingencies without the president present. To understand why Trump lost control, you have to follow the incentives of every player involved. Iran isn't a rogue actor making emotional decisions. They're a regional power with sophisticated understanding of international relations and a very clear reading of American political dynamics. Trump's strategy was built on the idea that pain creates compliance. Hit them hard enough and they'll surrender. But Iran studied what happened when Trump pulled the same strategy on North Korea, on Venezuela, on other adversaries. They saw that maximum pressure without diplomatic off-ramps just creates stalemate. They learned that if you can absorb pain long enough, American domestic politics will turn against the president faster than the target country collapses. Iran looked at Trump's approval ratings, which have dropped 11 points since this conflict started. They looked at polls showing 61% of Americans now believe the Iran operation was a mistake. They watched Republican senators from swing states start distancing themselves from the administration's position, and they calculated that time is on their side. European allies made their own calculation. France and Germany are facing energy crisis because of the Hormuz blockade. Their economies are being damaged by a conflict they had no voice in starting. When Trump demanded they support the blockade, they had to choose between American friendship and their own economic survival. They chose survival. Once they broke publicly, it gave cover for every other ally to do the same. This shifts power fundamentally. Trump can no longer claim international unity. He can no longer threaten Iran with global isolation. He's just the leader of one country trying to force another country into submission, while the rest of the world watches and increasingly refuses to help. The legal ramifications are also mounting. The House Foreign Affairs Committee announced this morning they're launching an investigation into whether the Hormuz blockade violates the War Powers Resolution, since Congress never authorized military action against Iran. Constitutional scholars from both parties are saying publicly that a naval blockade is an act of war under international law and requires congressional approval. This isn't opposition party theatrics. This is the ranking Republican on the Armed Services Committee, Senator Jim Inhofe, saying on Fox News this morning, "I support this president on most things, but I didn't vote to close the Strait of Hormuz. The American people didn't vote for that. And if we're going to do something this significant, Congress needs to have a say." Here's the domino effect we're looking at right now. If Trump refuses to reopen Hormuz, energy markets stay destabilized. If energy markets stay destabilized, inflation continues rising. If inflation rises, the Federal Reserve has to choose between raising interest rates during a geopolitical crisis or letting prices spiral. If interest rates rise, economic growth slows. If growth slows during an election year, Trump's poll numbers drop further. If his numbers drop, Republican senators in competitive races start breaking with him publicly to save their own seats. China is watching this closely. They see American allies refusing to support Washington. They see European powers making independent decisions contradicting American strategy. They're calculating how much room they have to challenge American positions in the South China Sea, in Taiwan policy, in trade negotiations. A weakened America with fractured alliances is an opportunity Beijing won't waste. Russia is watching too. They're seeing the same diplomatic isolation. They're wondering if this is the moment to test American resolve in Ukraine or in other contested regions where Moscow has interests. Where are Trump's usual defenders? Lindsey Graham went on television yesterday, and instead of his usual full-throated support, he said, "We need to reassess our strategy. That's politicians speak, for this isn't working." Ted Cruz, who never breaks with Trump publicly, released a statement saying, "I'm consulting with military experts and will have more to say soon." That's not endorsement. That's distancing. Why? Because they see the same polls Trump sees. They see voters in their states turning against this conflict. They're making the same calculation European allies made. Their political survival matters more than loyalty to a president whose Iran strategy has become a political liability. This creates a split in the Republican coalition that can't be healed before the election. On one side, the traditional foreign policy establishment who believe in working with allies and respecting international institutions. On the other side, the Trump loyalists who see compromise as weakness and believe America should act unilaterally, regardless of consequences. A divided party can't win a national election. So what does this mean for you personally? If you're planning to drive anywhere this spring, gas prices are projected to hit $5 per gallon nationally by April, with some markets seeing $6 or higher. The Hormuz blockade has removed approximately 18 million barrels per day from global markets. Even though the United States produces its own oil, prices are set globally. When supply drops anywhere, prices rise everywhere. If you buy groceries, you're about to see this impact spread across every aisle. Shipping costs have increased 34% since the blockade started because cargo ships are rerouting around Africa instead of through Suez to avoid the conflict zone. That adds 2 weeks to delivery times and thousands in fuel costs per container. Those costs get passed to you. Analysts are projecting that food price inflation, which had finally started to stabilize, will spike again. Estimates range from 6 to 9% increases over the next quarter. If you have a 401k, if you have a retirement account, if you have any money in the stock market, you've already felt this. The S&P 500 is down 14% since this conflict started. That's not just numbers on a screen. That's your retirement savings losing value because investors no longer trust that American foreign policy is stable or predictable. Where does this go from here? There are 3 realistic scenarios, and everyone leaves America weaker than we were 2 months ago. Scenario 1, forced retreat. Pressure from Congress, from military leadership, from economic advisors, and from Republican senators facing tough re-elections forces Trump to reopen Hormuz and withdraw the demand for Iranian regime change. He declares victory anyway, claims Iran is severely weakened, and tries to move on. Iran accepts a face-saving agreement that changes nothing fundamental. Both sides claim they won. But the world watched America's allies abandon us. The world watched Trump threaten consequences he couldn't deliver. That perception of weakness becomes reality in every future negotiation. Scenario 2, dangerous escalation. Trump, unable to accept diplomatic defeat, orders direct military strikes inside Iran, targeting leadership compounds, special forces operations to capture or kill high-value targets, ground forces deployment under the justification of protecting American interests. This triggers the regional war every analyst warned about. Iran strikes back at Saudi oil fields, at American bases across the Middle East, at commercial shipping worldwide. Oil hits $200 per barrel, the global economy contracts. American soldiers die in a conflict that has no clear exit strategy and no international support. Scenario 3, the slow collapse. Neither side backs down. Neither side escalates dramatically. The blockade continues. Strikes and counterstrikes continue. Diplomatic isolation continues. The American economy slowly deteriorates under sustained energy costs and market instability. European allies formalize their distance, creating new security arrangements excluding American leadership. Gulf states negotiate their own peace with Iran, cutting Washington out entirely. China and Russia expand influence in the vacuum left by American diplomatic failures. America remains the most powerful military on Earth, but is no longer the organizing principle of global order. The UN walkout wasn't just diplomatic theater, it was a symbol of something much larger breaking. It represents the death of an assumption that has guided American foreign policy since 1991, the assumption that when America acts, allies will follow. That American power is so overwhelming and American leadership so essential that other nations have no real choice but to support us even when they disagree. Iran rejected the ceasefire not because they're winning militarily. They rejected it because they see what Trump cannot or will not see. They see that American threats no longer automatically produce compliance. They see that allies are making independent calculations. They see that time and political pressure are on their side. Trump wanted maximum shock that would force instant surrender. He ended up with maximum isolation that makes any surrender impossible. So where are we right now at this exact moment? Donald Trump is in the White House, reportedly meeting only with his most loyal advisors, while cabinet secretaries wait for calls that don't come. America's traditional allies have publicly broken with his Iran strategy. The United Nations Security Council is preparing to vote on a resolution condemning the Hormuz blockade, and the United States will have to veto it, which will further isolate us. Iran has demonstrated it won't bend under pressure and has international sympathy growing because they're framed as defending sovereignty against aggression. Trump holds the most powerful office in the world, and yet he can't get Iran to answer the phone. He can't get France to coordinate military operations. He can't get his own party to unify behind the strategy. As we head into the next 2 weeks, expect Trump to try changing the narrative. He'll claim secret victories that can't be verified. He'll attack critics as weak or unpatriotic. He might attempt a dramatic military action designed to dominate news cycles and distract from diplomatic failures. But what he can't undo is the fracture in America's alliance system. What he can't reverse is the perception globally that American power has limits and American threats are negotiable. When allies walk out during your presentation, when your own generals tell you the strategy isn't working, when your party starts distancing to save themselves, there's no spin that repairs that. Iran didn't reject this ceasefire because they're irrational. They rejected it because they did the math. They looked at American politics, American alliances, and American economic vulnerability, and they concluded that Washington would break before Tehran would. Trump didn't build an exit strategy for this conflict. He built an escalation ladder with no rungs leading back down, and now he's trapped on it while Iran simply refuses to climb up and meet him. They're making him own every consequence, every economic impact, every diplomatic failure. The ceasefire rejection isn't the beginning of this crisis. It's the confirmation that Trump lost control weeks ago and has been trying to hide it through aggressive rhetoric and false declarations of progress. Iran just called the bluff on international television, with 14 nations walking out to prove the point. So, I'll leave you with these questions. When a president loses the support of allies, the trust of markets, and the unity of his own party during a military conflict he started, does that president still have the ability to end that conflict successfully? When the assumption of American dominance stops working, what replaces it? And when Iran looks at America right now and sees division, isolation, and desperation, how long are they willing to wait before they even consider negotiating? Drop your answers in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe, because what happens in the next 72 hours, whether it's the UN Security Council vote, the congressional investigation announcement, Trump's response to Iran's rejection, or the market reaction Monday morning when trading reopens, is going to determine whether this crisis gets contained or whether we're watching the start of something much bigger that reshapes global power for a generation. This story is accelerating, the pressure is building, and the world is watching to see if America can find a way out of a crisis that our own president created.